All right, let's dive right into this explainer and uncover a hidden truth about building wealth. What if I told you that for the first 10 years of your wealth building journey, you're mathematically guaranteed to feel like you're failing? I know, it's a bold claim, but it's the exact reason thousands of investors get derailed every single year. Most people actually end up abandoning their investments right before this silent, totally invisible flip occurs. So today, we're going to explore exactly what that flip is. We're revealing the hidden inflection point, where compounding stops being just some nice theory you read about and actually starts acting like a relentless money-making machine.
Look, I want to start by addressing a very real, very frustrating feeling. If you've started investing, you probably know exactly what I mean about the invest and wait strategy. On paper, it sounds foolproof, but in reality, it often feels like complete financial folklore. You put your money away, you do everything right, and you expect to feel a real sense of momentum. But day after day, month after month, the momentum just isn't there. It feels exactly like pouring water into a leaky bucket, and that hollow feeling of making zero progress is exactly why so many people just throw their hands up and walk away.
To really paint the picture of this frustration, just imagine it's a Sunday afternoon. You pull out your phone, you open your investment app, and you're expecting this surge of adrenaline. After all, you have been incredibly diligent. You've been putting away $300 every single month for over a year. But the screen loads and all you see is $4,200. You feel absolutely nothing. You made all those sacrifices, right? You skipped the fun dinners out, you literally ate ramen for a week, you budgeted strictly, and your reward is a number that barely looks larger than what you put in. It's just wildly underwhelming. But here is the crucial point. When you stare at that disappointing balance, you really need to understand that compounding is not failing you. What's failing you is your timeline. In these early stages of investing, growth is practically invisible. It is literally like pulling up a chair to watch a houseplant grow in real time. You know logically that photosynthesis is happening. You know the roots are getting deeper. But if you just sit there and stare at the leaves, you are not going to see them move. It requires a completely different perspective on time. So let's look at a concept that will help us visualize this perfectly.
That brings us to section 1, the metaphor, the snowball and the hill.
This perfectly illustrates the sharp divide between your human effort and the system's effort. Think of your wealth like a snowball sitting at the very top of a massive hill. Over on side A, we have the packing phase. In the beginning, you are doing absolutely all of the heavy lifting. You are down there in the freezing cold, packing the snow with your bare hands, pushing it, rolling it yourself. The hill isn't doing a single thing to help you yet. And this packing phase, this is exactly where the overwhelming majority of people quit. They do all this heavy lifting, maybe they see a friend make a quick buck on some hot stock, and suddenly their slow, boring process feels like a massive waste of time. But the tragic irony is that they are quitting right before side B, the hill phase, where gravity is about to step in and take over completely.
Let's move on to section 2, the proof, the math of Mia. Now, metaphors are great, but let's look at the hard proof. Seeing the actual numbers is often the only way to truly silence that doubt in the back of your mind. And what's really interesting here is how remarkably normal Mia's strategy is. She isn't a millionaire tech CEO. She just starts at age 25, and she invests $500 a month into a standard index fund, assuming an average historical return of about 10%. This establishes a really relatable baseline for us. It shows that building incredible wealth doesn't require an extraordinary income or some lucky crypto bet. It strictly requires adherence to a boring, repetitive process. So let's see what happens to Mia's money.
If we map out her journey chronologically, we see that familiar early frustration right away. In year 1, Mia put $6,000 out of her own pocket. Her account is worth $6,300, so the market gave her a measly $300 for a whole year of discipline. Completely underwhelming, right? But let's fast forward to year 10. She's contributed $60,000 of her own money. Her account is now sitting at $95,000, so the market has added $35,000. This is money she didn't have to work for. It's starting to feel real, sure, but make no mistake, at year 10, Mia is still doing the heavy lifting. She has still put in more than the market has. But wait until you see what happens at the finish line, at year 30.
Just look at the visual shock value here. At year 30, Mia's out-of-pocket contributions, the actual money she actively worked for and saved, total $180,000. But her total account value, a cool $1 million. That means the compounding machine created over $800,000 of wealth entirely on its own. While Mia was busy living her life, going to work, taking vacations, the machine was just working in the background. She didn't hustle for that 800 grand. She simply stayed out of the way and let gravity take that snowball down the hill. Which brings us to section 3, the reveal, the hidden inflection point.
So how exactly did she get from that frustrating year 1 to the explosive year 30? Well, there is a specific hidden moment in this journey that completely flips the narrative. Here is the definition of that magical moment. The inflection point is the quiet, totally uncelebrated second where your annual returns from the market's growth finally exceed your annual out-of-pocket contributions. Nobody puts this on a motivational poster, but it is hands down the most important milestone of your financial life. Because once this happens, you could literally hit a rough patch, skip a month of investing because money's a little tight, and your account balance would still jump by hundreds of dollars. The system is finally producing more energy than you're putting into it. For most standard investment strategies, just like Mia's, this critical inflection point happens right between year 12 and year 15. I want you to burn this time frame into your mind. This is the concrete finish line for your packing phase. If you can just make it to this window, it is the exact moment the wealth machine officially turns on, and the heavy lifting is taken completely out of your hands.
To understand why this happens, you just have to look at the math of the base. This changes your trajectory forever because your account base is finally large enough for small percentages to mean huge dollars. Think about it. In the beginning, a 10% return on a $5,000 balance is just $500. It barely buys groceries for a few weeks, right? But later on, that exact same 10% market return on a $500,000 balance yields $50,000 in a single year. The market didn't work any harder. The percentage didn't change. Your base simply reached critical mass.
All right, section 4, the obstacle, surviving market crashes.
Now, getting to that critical mass requires navigating some serious turbulence. We need to talk about the elephant in the room, the scariest part of this timeline. When you're in those first 10 years, watching your hard-earned money drop during a market downturn feels absolutely devastating. But we need to logically reframe this fear. A crash in those early years is essentially just noise. Because your balance is still relatively small, the actual mathematical dollar drop isn't what destroys your future wealth. The only thing that truly derails compounding is your emotional response to that noise.
This quote summarizes it perfectly. If you sell, you break the chain, and that chain is the entire game. You absolutely must endure the noise. When you panic and sell your assets to go to cash, you are actively interrupting the compounding process. You literally take your snowball, break it into pieces, and carry it all the way back to the top of the hill to start over. You can never, ever break the chain.
Let's wrap up with section 5, the action plan, surviving the boring years.
So, if the math is guaranteed but human emotion is the weak link, how do you actually survive the packing phase without giving up? Well, there are 3 core steps to master here. First, change what you measure. Stop measuring the massive dollar gap between your current balance and $1 million. It's just too depressing early on. Instead, measure your process, your consistency, and the sheer number of months you've successfully stayed in the market. Second, automate everything. Do not give your human brain the choice to be bored or scared. Set up those automatic transfers, forget about them, and ruthlessly protect your time horizon. And third, trust the machine. Remember that compounding is inherently invisible. It doesn't give you quick dopamine hits. It doesn't make for a thrilling dinner party story. It just quietly, relentlessly multiplies in the background.
At the end of the day, building wealth isn't about raw intelligence, and it isn't about having some extraordinary income. It is entirely about having the stomach to endure those long years when it feels like absolutely nothing is happening. The people who become wealthy aren't just the lucky ones. They're the ones who understood that the machine takes time to warm up, and they absolutely refuse to get in its way. So my question to you is this: are you willing to push through the packing phase to let gravity finally take over? Think about your timeline, trust the silent math, and whatever you do, don't break the chain.